Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see that for the moment we have around 6 participants, so let's wait maybe a minute to have some more. Welcome, everyone. Wait maybe a few more seconds. Okay, so I see that we are already 14 people, so I think that we can already start. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending to this new MedTech webinar. Today the topic will be will the 2025 proposal flip your IVDR priorities? We will have Samuel and Jordan with us. Unfortunately, Jordan is having technical issues, so his camera is not working, but in any case, he will be participating. So Jordan, please, next slide. Jordan, can you pass the slide, please?
Oh, sorry.
Well, first of all, some notes to take into account. This webinar is being recorded. For a better webinar experience, the webcams and the mics have been disabled. You can ask questions, posting them in the Q&A section. We will, if we have time, the participants, the speakers will answer them by the end of the webinar. So we kindly ask you that if we don't have time, we will answer to your question via email. So please do not send us the questions anonymously. Please put your name so we can track who is making the questions and we can properly answer them. As I was mentioning, the questions we have time will be answered by the end of the webinar. And also as we are recording this presentation, we will share both the presentation and the recording via email to all the participants upon request. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of who we are, a Product Life Group. As a whole group, as a whole company, we cover 150 countries with more than 2,000 experts. We are mainly in the consulting for quality, regulatory, and compliance for all the life science industry, pharma, nutraceutical, medical device for sure, and in vitro diagnostics. Can you please switch, Jordan? So for the medical device and in vitro diagnostics departments, specifically our core business are quality, regulatory, clinical, and market access. As you can see in this slide, we have more than 250 clients. Next slide, please, Jordan. And how do we support these kind of companies? From the development, strategy, design and development, to the evaluation, regulatory approval pathways, clinical verification and validation, also the market access and patient access with all the reimbursement pricing strategies, and for sure the marketing processes with the post-market surveillance and the distribution processes. Next slide, please. So I was mentioning before, today we'll have 2 or 4 medical device experts. We'll have Samuel and Jordan from the medical device team. So apart from now, I pass the floor to Samuel and Jordan to start the presentation. Enjoy.
Thanks a lot, Fernando, for this quick introduction. Just to give you a brief overview of how the webinar is going to go on. So basically, we will start to give you a bit of context to this webinar with Jordan taking over the fundamental shift in regulatory philosophy between IVDD and IVDR and the current pain points of the IVD sector. Then we will go on to where we currently stand and some focus on key clinical and performance evaluation considerations. And last but not least, we will cover the European Commission proposal for the revision of the MDR and IVDR and some key levers to secure your IVD portfolio. And then we will give you a bit of an overview of how we can support you on these many topics. So Jordan, you can take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Fernando, for the introduction. Yes, for the first part, we will go through from IVDD to IVDR, a fundamental shift in regulatory philosophy. So As you are no doubt aware, we come from an IVD sector regulated by the directive, where only 10 to 20% of the devices required the involvement of a notified body. Indeed, a large proportion of IVD manufacturers relied on self-certification without the involvement of a notified body, and only specific high-risk IVD categories require notified body involvement, including infectious disease assay, blood grouping reagents, etc. So we are now under the regulations that have introduced a new risk-based classification system with classes A, B, C, and D. And now only non-sterile Class A devices are eligible to a self-certification. So all Class B, C, and D devices require a notified body intervention for conformity assessment, technical file review, and QMS audit. We all agree that the IVDR has significantly strengthened the regulatory expectations, the level of evidence that manufacturers must provide, and the global organization, leading to some pain points in the IVD sectors. This is the point we've been going through now. So, as we said, IVDR significantly raises the regulatory bar and expands notified body involvement by expanded regulatory scrutiny. As we said, the majority of IVDs are now subject to notified body oversights. Then we will discuss this in more detail later, but the requirements in terms of performance evaluation have been straightened too, particularly through scientific validity and clinical performance. This creates system-level pressure on a limited notified body ecosystem. Due to a limited number of IVDR designated notified body, leading to an extent of conformity assessment timelines, a prioritization of higher risk class, creating a queue effect. Added to this is a change in the interpretation of the IVDR, varying expectations and review approaches in notified bodies, and increased procedural and documentation scrutiny. So regulators responded with transitional measures to avoid shortages, starting with Regulation 2022 112, then extended again through Regulation 2024 1860. And despite the regulatory safeguards set out to relieve burdens, manufacturers are still blocked even when they are technically strong in their documentation. This blockage is due to limited notified body availability, which has become the real gating factors for market access. Of course, all of these points have very real consequences for manufacturers, with increased compliance costs, portfolio reprioritization, delayed market access, and planning uncertainty. Also, higher operational risk and a competitive differentiation driven by regulatory execution capability. So, IVDR is more than a regulatory transition. It's a structural shift, reshaping portfolio economics, timelines, and competitive positioning. And I will let Samuel take it from here.
Thank you, Jordan, for this nice introduction, for setting the scene and outlining the regulatory shifts between IVDD and IVDR. Now let's look at the IVDR transition period and where we currently stand. So Jordan already touched a bit on that, but when the IVDR were first introduced in 2017, so now close to 10 years ago, there was no foreseen planification for a transition period for IVDD self-certified in vitro diagnostic products. However, as we saw earlier, there were quite a high number of products that needed to be transitioned to the IVDR that did not require the intervention of the notified body under the IVDD. So that led to the fact that there was a clear bottleneck in terms of notified body capacity. And also in 2019 and 2020, the COVID happened. And so most of the stakeholders in the in vitro diagnostic area were working on alleviating the pressure on the COVID crisis rather than working towards the IVDR transition, as was necessary at the time. With all that in mind, in 2022, the regulation 2022-112 was introduced, and it introduced a transition period for in vitro diagnostics that were IVDD self-certified, so that did not require a notified body involvement. This led to transition period up until May 2025 for the Class D product, May 2026 for the Class C product, and May 2027 for the Class B and Class A product. Still, in the between 2022 and between 2022 and 2024, we saw that this bottleneck, this notified body bottleneck, was still present. And so, by way of regulation 2024-1860, these transition period were extended to December 2027 for Class D product, December 2028 for Class C product, and December 2029 for Class B and Class A sterile products, with certain conditions that are implemented to benefit from this transition period. If you can go on to the next slide, please, Jordan. These conditions to be eligible for the IVDR transition period are the same one, well, for some part are the same one than the one that were introduced by the regulation 2022-112. Basically be compliant with high safety standards. So basically the need for devices to be placed on the market before May 26, 2022, and have the status of legacy devices. These devices still needed to be compliant with the directive. The manufacturer should not add significant changes to the design and the intended purpose of these products, and no unacceptable risk to the health or safety of the patient, users, or other persons need to be identified for these devices. It introduces a new measure to comply with the IVDR. So basically, it introduces new requirements for the transition period that the manufacturer needed to take measures to comply with the IVDR. So the regulation 2024-1860 introduces the fact that a full QMS needed to be implemented no later than May 26, 2025. Active measures needed to be performed by manufacturers toward the IVDR compliance, and particularly submitting a formal request to a notified body based on the timelines that we saw just earlier, and have a written agreement with the notified body within the 4 months of the request. The failure to meet any of these conditions results in immediate loss of the transition benefit and the market access. So basically, this regulation 2024-1860 provides a breathing room, but it does not lower the requirements for the transition. So manufacturers need to be proactive to comply with the IVDR. If we go on to the next slide. What this extension change and does not change is basically that the transitional period are extended for eligible legacy IVDs. So the extension is conditional. There still needs to be a continued IVDD compliance required. No significant design or intended purpose changes need to be introduced to this product, and there are strict notified body application and agreement deadlines. What is still applicable is that the manufacturer needs to comply with the IVDR post-market and surveillance obligations. It was already the case in 2022, but it's still the case in 2024. And one key thing is that there needs to be demonstrated work towards being IVDR compliant by the manufacturers, mostly by having a full QMS by the 26th of May 2025. An active progress towards IVDR compliance, including, for instance, the performance evaluation that needs to be planned, documented, justifiable under IVDR standards. And that will be the thing that Jordan will touch on just later on. So also something to keep in mind, these extended deadlines, they do not eliminate the risk of future certification bottlenecks. We know that there are still only 19 notified bodies, so that's something to keep in mind. So early readiness is the strongest mitigation against future bottlenecks. So now we saw that the performance evaluation is a key aspect of this regulation. So I will let Jordan touch a bit on that.
Yes, thank you, Samuel. So just a quick overview on performance evaluation. So to demonstrate that a product is safe and produces the expected clinical benefits, the manufacturer must provide clinical evidence. This clinical evidence is based on the three pillars of performance evaluation that are scientific validity, analytical performance, and clinical performance. And to do so, the manufacturer must demonstrate scientifically the positive effect of the device due to its function, such as screening, monitoring, diagnosing, etc., or the positive effect on patient management in terms of public health. This is the definition of a clinical benefits. If we refer to the definition of clinical evidence given in Article 2.36, it is the clinical data and the results of the performance evaluation which make it possible to assess whether the device is safe and whether it offers the expected clinical benefits when used in accordance with the manufacturer's intended purpose. The performance evaluation is therefore an essential element in demonstrating IVDR compliance and obtaining CE marking. So to secure the IVD portfolio, manufacturers must lock in their strategy for clinical evidence. So just a quick words on the three pillars of performance evaluation. So scientific validity is defined as the association of an analyte with a clinical condition or a physiological state. It demonstrates the value of measuring the analyte in questions or its properties. In a way, scientific validity demonstrates how the device can have a positive impact on the patient's health. It defines the expected clinical benefits that the medical device must achieve, which the clinical evidence must demonstrate. So scientific validity is independent of the device method, but highly linked to its intended purpose. The strategy to demonstrate scientific validity is more often based on literature search. Thus, the methodology have to be well described in the performance evaluation plan. Then the analytical performance of a device represents its ability to correctly detect or measure a given analyte. The relevant performance characteristics, which form part of the GSPRs and are linked to the analytical characteristic of a device, must be supported by existing evidence or by the generation of new evidence. And in the vast majority of cases, this can be demonstrated through analytical performance studies. Then clinical performance is the ability of a device to produce results correlated with a given clinical condition or physiological state. In general, clinical performance is demonstrated through clinical performance study, but scientific literature on the device use may also be a source of performance data, as well as published experience from routine diagnostic tests. The clinical performances to be demonstrated may vary from a device to another and are highly linked to the intended use of the device. So now, what are the impacts of the 2025 proposal on performance evaluation? The proposed amendment to IVDR does not have a major impact on performance evaluation. We identified 4 points which will be modified. First one, the proposal allows the use of computational modeling and in silico testing to support the clinical evidence. Second point, the performance evaluation consultation procedure will be removed, and instead the possibility of early advice from expert panel for class C and D IVDs will be introduced. Third point, the frequency of post-market surveillance for class C and D device is modified. Manufacturers shall update the PSUR in the first year after the certificate is issued and every 2 years thereafter. So as a reminder, it is the conclusion of the PSUR that guides the need to update the performance evaluation report. And finally, notification and authorization procedures for certain performance study will be simplified. For example, there is no more prior authorization for performance study with only routine blood draws, and no more notification of performance study on companion diagnostic using only leftover specimens. And Samuel, I let you.
Thank you, Jordan, for this nice transition into the European Commission proposal for revision of the IVDR. Please keep in mind that you can ask any question at any time with the Q&A box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We noticed that a few questions were asked during your registration, and they were mostly associated with this 2025 proposal. So if you have any question on this proposal during the presentation, please do not hesitate to ask, and we will assess them at the end of the presentation. So let's look at the 2025 proposal. If we can go on to the next slide. Yeah, just as a quick reminder, there were, so basically all the amendments that were introduced before 2024, including the 2024 1860 amendment, were mostly modifying the period to which you needed to comply with the IVDR. They did not modify the requirements themselves, or at least just at the margin. So that's why the European Commission, based on several feedbacks from stakeholders, including healthcare institutions, including manufacturers, including professional associations, they launched a public consultation in 2024 and a call for evidence on the EU legislation on MDs and IVDs as part of a targeted revision. More than 500 stakeholders contributed to this call for evidence, including a product life group. So we have a feedback to this targeted revision, and you can find it on the link on the bottom right-hand side, bottom left-hand side of the screen. And it led to the proposal in December 2025 with a pragmatic simplification of certain rules of MDR and IVDR. Please keep in mind that it's still at a proposal stage. It's not yet adopted, not yet approved. There isn't a date for its entry into force, and it has no impact on the current transition, including the Article 110 transition timelines. If we look at the overview of this proposal, if we go on to the next slide, please. If we look at the overview of this proposal, we have segmented the key proposed updates. We have not covered all of the updates, but you can ask for specific updates if you want. But we have covered most of the proposed updates under 4 categories. The first one being the performance evaluation and the procedural adjustments to the performance evaluation. So Jordan already touched a bit on that, so I will not focus on this slide. The second one is the reduced notified body intensity. This proposal introduced the fact that you can have one product representative of a group or of a generic group for review for the notified body for low and medium class products, so class B and class C products, which is quite significant in terms of workload for both the manufacturer and the notified bodies. Secondly, there isn't a need anymore for a notified body review for class A sterile product. And last but not least, there isn't any more fixed 5-year certificate validity. In this proposal, there is a timeline that is proposed based on the risks associated with the product. So basically, no fixed 5-year, it will be linked to the risk of the product as assessed by the notified body. So please keep in mind these are still proposals, right? The third topic is related to the regulatory governance that is recalibrated. So Jordan touched a bit already on that, but that's quite significant. There is a reduced PSUR frequency for Class C and Class D products. So now the PSUR will need to be updated on the first year after marketing of the product and then every 2 years, which tremendously reduces the workload associated with compiling all the data. Does not mean that you shouldn't compile all the data, especially reactive data during the period, but it means that the administrative workload associated with compiling the PSUR is tremendously reduced, going from 1 year to 2 years. The proposal also introduces the fact that for small and medium enterprises, there is a PRC flexibility, and I will focus on that in the following slides. One significant topic is the expanded in-house exemption. So there is a removal of the no equivalent condition for in-house products. Also, I will focus on that in a following slide. And last but not least, for this specific topic, which is, in my opinion, the greatest impact for the manufacturers, there is also the outsourced design that is allowed, but the regulatory accountability that is retained. So this regulatory governance recalibrated is really, really key for manufacturers. And last but not least, there is the topic of a greater flexibility and system modernization with the priority and railing notified body reviews, and also earlier evidence strategy guidance with expert panel strategic inputs, as mentioned by Jordan during the performance evaluation presentation. If we go more in depth for these specific topics, let's go on to the next slide for the ones that are related to regulatory reliefs for manufacturers and small and medium enterprises. So they have a significant impact for manufacturers. The first one is that the proposal allows for a more flexible certificate and lifecycle management with the removal of the fixed 5-year certificate validity, replaced, as stated earlier, by periodic risk-based reviews. The second topic is the introduction on a formal legal basis for a structured dialogue with pre- and post-submission discussions, and also pre-agreed change control plans, which can, in certain conditions, remove or at least significantly reduce administrative workload for the change that you want to implement to your products. And last but not least, the representative technical documentation review, which tremendously reduces the workload for the review of the devices with one device per generic group, category, or portfolio that is being reviewed by the notified body. The second topic is mostly linked to small and medium enterprises with an adjusted notified body fee structure for micro and SMEs. We know that a lot of companies are small and medium in the in vitro diagnostic field and in the medtech field in general, and the notified body fees could be a blocking point for several of these companies. So this proposal aims to have a more adapted fee structure so that micro and small and medium companies could still place products on the market under the MDR and the IVDR. Also introduced by this proposal is the PRC flexibility. So there is a removal of detailed qualification requirements for the PRC. As you remember, there are, in the current IVDR, several requirements to access the role of PRC. These are removed under the proposal. And one key part also is that for SMEs, external PRC are allowed without permanently and continuously available constraints, which could pose a big issue for some of these companies. And finally, if we look at the documentation and reporting part, there is a reduced notified body involvement for lower risk devices. So class S sterile devices no longer require notified body intervention. The SSP is limited to higher risk devices, so companion diagnostic, class C self-testing, and class D. And the observed frequency is clarified and reduced for class C and class D devices. So we already touched on that, but 1 year, the first year of marketing, and then every 2 years. If we look at one key part of the proposal that I know raises question is the in-house IVD part, and especially the increased operational flexibility for health institution. So there is within this proposal the removal of the no equivalent condition. So basically, health institution could pretty much create in-house devices, in-house in vitro diagnostics for any condition, even if there are already CE mark product on the market, which was not the case which is still not the case under the current regulation. There is also a possibility of transfer to other health institutions if the transfer is justified by public health considerations. So that's quite important because it opens the door for central laboratories to create in-house devices and then send them to other laboratories for if the public health considerations allows it. So in the past, the healthcare institution needed to justify the fact that there was no equivalency marked product on the market. Nowadays, the justification is mostly linked to the transfer aspect. If they want to transfer it to another healthcare institution, then they will need to state that it is in the interest of the public health. And there are also streamlined documentation expectations, not a full exemption, but tremendously reduces the administrative workload for healthcare institutions in developing in-house testing. Basically, they don't really have the requirements to build on a technical documentation completely equivalent to what is done on the manufacturer side. They have some considerations to take into account, but the workload is quite tremendously reduced. This particular point requires a potential strategic reassessment by manufacturers because there is a clear protection from the CE marked market exclusivity. Basically, if you were to plan on developing a CE marked in vitro diagnostic device for a niche market or something like that, with the assumption in mind that the healthcare institution could not develop in-house devices in competition to what you are providing onto the market, then it's no longer the case. However, there is a clear opportunity with this proposal to supply reagents, instruments, software, components directly to lab and transition from a finished IVD manufacturer to an enabling partner for in-house solutions. So I know that for some of the manufacturers and for some reagents manufacturers, it's a key part of the proposal because it allows them to have another business model in the coming months or years, depending on when the proposal, if it is adopted, is adopted. To summarize, the in-house revision does not deregulate the system. It may, however, rebalance the dynamics between the industry and the laboratories, as stated just in the few points just before. If we look at the specific subset of in vitro diagnostic devices, it also introduces changes for orphan and breakthrough devices. It actually defines what is an orphan and a breakthrough device, and it allows certain regulatory considerations specifically for orphan and breakthrough devices. Basically, there is a portfolio preservation for legacy orphan IVDs. So there is a grandfathering of legacy devices that is possible if they were CE marked under the IVDD and confirmed as orphan by an expert panel. So basically a continued market access beyond standard transition periods. We know that for these types of products, it's particularly hard to have a performance evaluation that is in line with the IVDR. So that's something that is introduced to make sure that the buffer period, the transition period for these specific legacy devices is adapted to the workload of the manufacturers. Then there is a dedicated regulatory pathway for orphan and breakthrough devices with a formal designation needed by an expert panel and then an access to a priority review, a rolling conformity assessment if these devices bring considerable improvement to what is currently available on the market, basically, based on the expert panel advice. And there is also a reduced notified body fee that is foreseen for designated orphan and breakthrough devices. So there are opportunities for market access of niche and high-value IVDs for orphan and breakthrough devices that is introduced by this proposal. And one thing that we noticed while reviewing the full text, because it's not introduced in the table at the beginning of the text, is the fact that Article 10, so basically for manufacturers, and specifically paragraph 14, is modified. So this proposal introduces a clearer recognition that the design and manufacturing may be outsourced, and a greater flexibility in organizational models. Basically, in the past, this paragraph only covered the fact that manufacturers needed to identify any external legal or natural person that designed or manufactured in vitro diagnostics, and needed to send this information to authorities. And then the only thing that was presented in the regulation was the fact that the manufacturer was fully responsible for the technical documentation compliance. The way that it's rewarded in this proposal is that the external party can now draw up and maintain the relevant parts of the technical documentation. So if they do design, then the parts associated with design. If they do manufacturing, the parts associated with manufacturing. And they can directly make those parts available to the competent authorities upon request without necessarily going through the manufacturer. Something to note is, in this case, the legal manufacturer must ensure that the external party fulfills its obligation. So if a part of the technical documentation, specifically the part associated with the design and manufacturing, is maintained by the external party, then the manufacturer must implement, for instance, by way of contract or by way of QA agreement, they must implement something that covers them to make sure that the external party draws up and maintains these relevant parts of the technical documentation. And then the legal manufacturer must maintain the remaining parts of the technical documentation, in particular documentation on information to be supplied. So basically instructions for use, labeling, training if needs be, and post-market surveillance. And they shall ensure the availability of all the parts of the technical documentation upon request by the authorities. So they transmit their remaining parts, and the external party transmits the relevant parts of the technical documentation. So, for instance, the one associated with design and manufacturing. Something to note is that the proposal clarifies organizational flexibility, but it does not dilute the manufacturer responsibility. The manufacturer is still, at the end of the day, responsible to ensure that the technical documentation is run up, maintained, and that the products placed on the market have an adequate safety and performance profile. With all that in mind, some key regulatory takeaways. As of today, the proposal does not repeal the IVDR at all. It does not modify the current Article 110 transition timelines. It does not lower the core safety and scientific performance standards. It does not eliminate the notified body oversight for higher risk devices. It mostly introduces targeted procedural and proportional adjustments to ensure that all stakeholders are able to comply with their obligations, but not the regulation of the system as a whole. So with that in mind, you need to remain proactive, take action to meet all of the regulation 2024-1860 deadlines. So there are some that have already passed, some that are upcoming. So keep in mind that you need to comply with these deadlines still, while actively monitoring the 2025 proposal. Something to keep in mind is that the transition timelines do not change. The 2025 proposal mostly introduces reduction in terms of administrative workload on certain activities that do not lower the safety and scientific performance standards of the regulation. So with the consideration of the 2024-1860 amendment and the 2025 proposal, there are some key levers to secure your IVD portfolio. And these levers are based on 5 key questions that we are used to ask to our customers to make sure that they are either already complying with the regulation or have a strategy to comply with the regulation in due time. Something to keep in mind is that the IVDR readiness is not just about documentation, it's also structured regulatory governance and control portfolio risk. That's something that we hear quite often. Do I maintain this product under the IVDR? Do I not maintain these products under the IVDR? So there are regulatory considerations, there are business considerations. So to make sure that all of these considerations are converging towards a same goal, These are the 5 questions that you should ask yourself. Have you secured the transition eligibility? Is your IVDR aligned QMS fully operational? It's already applicable. It's been applicable since the 26th May of 2025. So that's something that you need to keep in mind to make sure that you can benefit from this transition period. Have you already identified the adequate notified body, and do you already have a notified body agreement written within the required timelines? So for those of you that only have a Class B and Class C product, there is still time to do this workload, but it's something that is quite pressing now. Is your device level transition plan formally documented? So basically, which are the products that you're prioritizing? Do you already have identified key products in your portfolio? And are there significant changes, risks under the strict control of this product? Do you have everything under control, basically, in terms of changes? The second question is your notified body strategy truly locked? So as we saw, depending on the class of your product, there are different timelines, but it's quite pressing now. So you should already have, even if you have Class B and Class C product, you should already have discussed with your notified body or the different notified bodies that you plan on going to the submission strategy and the agreement strategy. So that's something to keep in mind. And do you have visibility on expected review timelines? We've seen with some notified bodies that the timelines can take quite a lot of time. So that's something to consider as well in your transition strategy. Discuss this with your notified body when you sign the contract. And have you built a buffer against future certification congestion? As we saw earlier, there may be a bottleneck at the end of the day for Class B and Class C products. So consider that you need to discuss with your notified body as soon as possible and identify the strategy associated with that. The third question is your evidence strategy defensible? Basically, make a claim to evidence mapping per device or per device group to make sure that all your claims are associated with evidence that you have generated. Have you clearly decided to generate new data or refine claims? So there are different strategies. Either you generate new data to back up the claims that you already have, or refine claims based on the data that you already have. So these are 2 different strategies that are fully acceptable, but this is something to discuss at this current stage, and it has regulatory and business implications. Are all the PEP and PER, so basically everything related to performance evaluation gaps, identified and documented? And is your PMPF aligned with your certification roadmap? The fourth question is, are you updating only what truly matters? So basically, update first and foremost your strategy, the evidence generation, so everything related to performance evaluation, and the critical Annex 2 and Annex 3 gaps, so basically everything related to technical documentation. There are certain areas that take a bit more time, basically everything related to verification and validation. So that's something to keep in mind at the beginning of the project or even during the project. Are all the PMS vigilance and SERP processes already IVDR ready? As we saw earlier, that's something that you already need to have in place to comply with the transition period. And are you evading necessary documentation overwork? And last but not least, and that's something that we've discussed with many different companies at this stage, the proposal may alleviate the pressure on this specific topic, but as we said earlier, the proposal is still a proposal, it's not yet implemented. But is your portfolio strategically prioritized? Have you ranked your device by regulatory risk and market value? Do you know which product may not justify IVDR investment and are resources aligned with priority products? As performance evaluation is quite expensive, there may be some product lines that need to be disregarded, at least initially in your transition. And that's something that you need to already know so that you don't overwork on these specific products where they won't go onto the IVDR down the line. And to help you with all of these questions, we can definitely provide you with support with our IVD experts. on tailored regulatory strategy, technical documentation. We've also worked quite a lot on notified body submission support and remediations for in vitro diagnostics, for reagents, for software, for instruments, for different notified bodies. And we can also work on outsourcing some strategic activities, PRC, performance evaluation. So our experts and our special tools can help you in building a robust, compliant, and efficient regulatory framework, ensuring that you have successful interactions with your notified body, which is a key part of this IVDR transition, and strong clinical and performance evidence generation, which is the second most important part of this regulation. So thanks a lot for your listening, and now we can go on to the questions.
Great. Thanks a lot, Samuel and Jordan, for the presentation. Now, as Samuel was mentioning, let's go for the Q&A. I can see that we already have two questions. One is from Mary. Thanks for the question, Mary. So the first question is, can you please clarify what is meant by companion testing?
Are we talking about companion diagnostics?
I guess I don't have much information about the question, Samuel. I just have this question. Can you please clarify what is meant? Yeah.
I guess, Samuel.
Okay. So basically, so it was you, Jordan, that raised this question, this topic, or was it me? I can't remember. So basically,
as you want. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
So basically, companion diagnostic, companion testing is related to in vitro diagnostics which are associated with the use of pharmaceutical drugs. So basically, to monitor the performance of the drug, or to ensure that you have the correct drug that is selected for a specific pathology. So if you want to further answer the question, Jordan, but I think that basically covers it.
Yes, it's a companion diagnostic, as Samuel said, is associated with a specific drug, and the use of the companion diagnostic is mandatory before the patient take the drug. An example is for a cancer treatment, the companion diagnostic may screen patient who will have the best answer, the best response to the treatment, and only to those patients the treatment will be delivered. It's just an example, but basically it's when an IVD is associated with a pharmaceutical drug.
Okay, before we take any other question, one topic that I did not mention is that the feedback for this proposal is still open up until the 28th of April. So if you want to provide feedback to this proposal, you can go on to the European Union website, and there is a specific section for the call for evidence.
Thanks, Samuel. Thanks, Jordan. Not sure, Samuel, if you want to continue.
Yeah, there was one specific question that was raised during the registration associated with the in-house devices. I hope that we answered the question. Basically, something to keep in mind is that there is the removal of the equivalence that is added, the possibility of transfer that is added, and basically also the reduction of the administrative workload for the healthcare institution that is added. So that's quite important and quite a big impact for specific manufacturers that are working on each in vitro diagnostic product. And I think for the other questions, and also I saw that there was a question for near patient testing. Basically, the main topic addressed by the proposal for near patient testing is the opportunity to provide the instructions for use in an electronic format, as is the case for devices that are aimed for professional use. So that's something that is introduced by this proposal, but that's the main thing for near patient testing. Do you have any other questions?
So I don't see any more questions in the box. So to all the participants, if you have any further questions. Yeah, we have one question from an anonymous. So the question is, do you have some tool software for UDI devices registration or provide any help with the bulk upload?
So we have definitely services associated with the UDAMED UDI and device registration. So that's something that we've done for different manufacturers in the past. So we can discuss it if you can put your name so that we can discuss it later on with you. That would be the best way to proceed for this specific question.
Okay, so let's wait a couple more minutes to see if we have any further question in the box. For the moment, we don't have more. So yeah, in any case, I want to thank to Samuel and Jordan for the amazing presentation they made, and also to all our participants for joining one more webinar in here at the live group. So I don't see any more question. So for everyone that has any further question, once we are done with this webinar, feel free to contact us, Samuel, Jordan, or even me, and we'll be happy to answer your questions, or even to have like a more personal meeting with you, just to check about your challenges, about any quality or regulatory needs that you may have, and to check if we can support you. We'll be happy to have. So, Samuel, Jordan, I don't see any more questions, so I think that we can close this webinar.
Thanks a lot for the attendance. And if you have any further question, or if you have any need for services associated with your regulatory strategy for in vitro diagnostics, or any services related to us outsourcing for the activities that we mentioned during this presentation, do not hesitate to send us an email, as Fernando just said.
Okay. I think that we can close it. Thanks to all the participants. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.